Thank you.
What's poppin', people? It's Dante. Getting my morning started here in the Garden of Eden. Check it out. The first thing I found is some motor oil. And so, yeah, just gonna walk towards the sunrise. You know, never ceases to put a smile on my face. You know, what is the ultimate goal in life? I think the ultimate goal is to simply never miss another sunrise again. You know, the ultimate privilege in this modern world is being outside in embodied reality, moving your physical body, and having the sunlight kiss your skin. I think that is a very simple way to appreciate the day, is to look at these small things in life as the things you are most grateful for, and then everything else sort of falls into place. You know, where I'm simply grateful today to have the sun. I'm grateful today to be out in the fresh air. I'm grateful today to have a bottle of water that keeps me hydrated. I'm grateful today for the simple things, like the pleasures of the sights and the sounds and the smells of life. You know, looking at these beautiful looming trees and then having the ability to uplift this moment in a photograph using a compact digital camera like the Ricoh GR, and sort of photographing these things that pique my curiosity, and sort of living my everyday life and bringing my camera for the ride, and simply allowing photography to be this way in which I engage with reality and have a dialogue with the divine. You know, for me as a photographer, I think it's more interesting to think about the way in which we can use photography to transcend the material world through the creation of new worlds. You know, where photography is a superpower that allows you to create a new world in a fraction of a second. And to me, this is where I thrive in my everyday life, is waking up with this eternal loop of returning to the sunrise each day, waking up with the eternal loop of your routine and your sort of daily things that you do with your mundane existence in this everyday life, but using photography as a way for you to flourish in life. You know, for me, this is what I deeply resonate with in terms of the philosophy behind my photography, is simply treating it as life affirmation, as me saying yes to life and thank you for the day, a way for me to affirm my life and my inevitable fate. You know, Amor Fati, the love of our fate. You know, what is our fate ultimately? Our fate is ultimately death. And, you know, and sort of affirming that conclusion of, you know, of our inevitable fate, affirming the fact that we are flesh, that we cut, that we bleed, that we feel sorrow, pain, and greed, that we lust for the flesh of others, and that we are imperfect in our design, yet strive for the divine and find perfection in all of life's imperfections. This to me is where I thrive, is recognizing that any day, any photograph that I make could potentially be my last. And then through setting up my day this way, I thrive in the spirit of play, returning to the childlike state. You know, for me, when I think about my photography, I simply want to tap into that inner childlike curiosity and return to day one each day, where I never want to feel bogged down by what is good or bad photography or what I'm supposed to be doing with this thing. But I want to embrace play openly and remind myself that I'm created in the image of God, that I'm a child of God, and then returning to that state of being where you know nothing. Well, then everything becomes novel, everything becomes interesting, everything is beautiful, and I think worth uplifting in a photograph. You know, how many things can you photograph in a lifetime of yours? How curious can you become in your lifetime of yours? You know, for me, the ultimate aim is to increase my curiosity. It has nothing to do with photography. For me, photography has everything to do with the way in which I engage with humanity, the way in which I openly explore the world through that inner state of being, and using the external world as a way for me to reflect the internal state of my soul and the things that I create. And so I think that returning to this sort of mundane lane and walking it every single day, but thriving with this camera in hand, I find infinite new things to say through the medium of photography. When you look at the photography as a word, phos meaning light, graphe meaning writing or drawing, I think that it's interesting to consider the way in which photography gives you a voice. It gives you an ability to write with light. And for me, my interest is ultimately light itself. And so as I catch the sun in my eyes this morning, I think of light and how that's my guiding star. That's what I desire after all, is light itself. And that's the medium and my subject in my photography. And what I love about light itself is the way in which light is always in flux, is always changing and always moving. And so like the light, I want to be in this constant state of motivation. Motivation being very simple, movere, meaning to move my two legs through the world, to move my physical body onwards and upwards towards the sun. You know, but you can't get too close to it or else you'll burn up. So maybe it's best to remind yourself that you're bound by gravity. And despite that fact, through creation, we can strive upwards. I actually have the Ricoh GF2 flash on my camera today, and I'm going to experiment using this flash while I'm on the streets and living my everyday life. So maybe I should set this up properly so that I can start making pictures with it. And just, you know, use photography for me. I use it as a way for me to simply explore openly like what reality will manifest to be in a photograph. Meaning, I'm simply curious about what life will render to be in a photograph. You know, I think that it's just interesting to follow that curiosity of, you know, just engaging with life's complexities, whether you're photographing details, textures, people, places, things, trees, and natural things, and simply allowing that sort of looseness in your practice to guide you. That sort of instinct, that gut intuition is what we should be tapping into when we're out on the streets practicing our photography, and not really thinking, but just feeling from the heart and shooting with thumos, with vitality at the forefront, and sort of just allowing the chips to fall as they may, and simply just photographing that sort of spirit of play where you're just curious about what life will look like in a photo. And so using the flash is allowing me to isolate things from the background, even in this sort of gloomy, cloudy kind of morning. We do have sunrise, but there isn't much light right now. And so bringing the light on top of my camera allows me to sort of play with light, which I'm curious about. And so I will do that. So I use the Ricoh GR3, Ricoh GR3X. I've got the camera set to some very particular settings. I have the camera in program mode right now, or it's manual mode actually, right, to shoot the flash, but I typically use it just in like program mode, automatic mode. I'll typically shoot it with the snap focus or the single point autofocus. I actually have the single point autofocus set to the FN button, so I can quickly alternate between snap focus and single point focus, which is really nice. I love the Ricoh because it's compact, where I can put it in my pocket, so I can just bring it with me to work. I can bring it with me and just sort of live my everyday life and simply snapshot my way through the day. Not really trying to say anything, but what will be said hopefully will reflect in the things that I create with the photographs I make. And so I think that yeah, the other thing is with this workflow, I use small JPEG files with high contrast black and white cranked to the maximum. The contrast, the grit, the grain, everything in between is set to the maximum. I've got a 4 megabyte file. It's extremely small. And so the reason why I like using this sort of setup that's compact, that's simplified and streamlined, is because I want to photograph with speed. I want to sort of make sure that I'm consistently moving through the world and making new things. And at nighttime when I come home, using this very fast workflow, I have no processing time. I have nothing I really need to do other than put the SD card into my iPad, import the photos, click, 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 make favorites, upload them, and move on to the next day, which allows me to be in a perpetual flow state. And that's simply where I want to be, endlessly. And I couldn't tell you what's causing me to make pictures. I couldn't tell you what drives me to make pictures other than this notion of enthusiasm. When you look at the word enthusiasm, enthusiasm is interesting. It essentially derives from this notion to be possessed by God. And I genuinely find that there is something in me, like a daemon, that like pushes me to make pictures. I don't know what it is. It's like genuinely something that's like pushing me to continuously just click that damn shutter. And I can't really tell you or articulate why I make pictures in that regard. I can tell you that I love life, I love humanity, that I love sort of affirming my life through the creation of these things, but I can't necessarily pinpoint a direct reason why, like I'm trying to say anything. It's like I'm just being like forced to do this thing. It's an obsession. It's something that I can't stop doing. And I found that my trip recently to Tokyo, I just arrived 2 days ago, or a day ago, whatever, yeah, 2 days ago, from my trip in Tokyo, that I really fell in love with this sort of like obsession of like the crowd, and like this obsession of photographing in these like dense environments where there is such a high population of people and high population density in these locations in Tokyo that I just thrive in creatively, where I used on my trip the Ricoh GR3X on my neck with the Ricoh GR3 in my pocket. And essentially I was going back and forth between using these two cameras and adopting new techniques. For instance, using the flash on top of my Ricoh GR3, or using the GR3X with the crop mode built into the camera, so that I was using 71 millimeters and creating these very abstract sort of Japanese woodblock inspired pictures, or, you know, using the Caravaggio lighting of chiaroscuro to sort of etch shape and form, using light into the people, places, things, and surfaces as they would enter into these sort of pockets in Shibuya Crossing or Shinjuku Station, where there was just such high population density, very difficult to put order within the frames. But through isolating the faces and these sort of slivers of light within the pictures, I was able to create something from nothing using light. And so earlier discussing light, this to me is the ultimate thing that sort of fuels me and my photography, is the fact that you cannot make the same photograph twice. For the way the light casts upon surfaces, people, places, and things will always be different and will never be the same. And so by following the light and using light in my photography, I thrive creatively, because it reminds me that I can't make the same photograph twice, and that everything is in flux and everything is changing. And I, as a photographer, want to be in that perpetual flow state of creation and change and never stay the same. And so I remind myself that every single day when I wake up and go out to make pictures. And so the goal is to simply return to the amateur state, to return to day one each day, and return to that child's mind, where when you think of a child has endless potential to grow, to transform, and to evolve. And that's essentially where I want to be every single day. And so before I go to sleep, I simply treat it like a miniature death. I say to myself, you know, today was a great day. If I die in my sleep, so be it. And so when I wake up in the morning, I'm just so grateful for the day. I'm so grateful. It feels like I was born again each and every morning. And so each morning is a miniature birth for me, and each night is a miniature death. And through photography, I affirm my life with each click of the shutter and remind myself this very simple mantra, that my next photograph is my best photograph. And that's what carries me forward in my mind to continuously find meaning in the mundane, beauty in life's imperfections, and uplift these things in a photograph through the creation of new worlds. And so going forward, I'm going to adopt my new techniques that I learned in Tokyo, such as the 71mm crop on my Ricoh GR 3X, using the flash on the Ricoh GR 3, and also experimenting with photographing at night with slow shutter speeds. And so there was a lot of different creative breakthroughs that I undertook while I was in Tokyo that I'm really just like obsessed with right now, that I really want to just like be pushing right now. I kind of feel like I needed to stay in Tokyo for a year or so. I probably should have. What's amazing about Tokyo, and just like a Tokyo recap and just like discussing Tokyo kind of candidly here, is it is such an advanced city in like very simple, small ways, where every single toilet has a bidet. You sit down, it's a freaking supercomputer, your butt is warm. It doesn't matter where you are, it could be just a random mall that you go into. You know, the people on the bus are so orderly and nobody is screaming and complaining. There's single file lines, the trains come instantly. Everything is very clean, despite the fact that it's difficult to find trash cans. Somehow the streets are extremely immaculate. You know, the people are so nice, and you know, you can go to these there's like all you can eat meat places everywhere. The people are incredibly beautiful, the people are incredibly healthy, and I think it has to do with the diet. Like there's meat everywhere, and just meat is like the most nutrient dense, satiating food that you can consume. And I just thrive there because I could go to these places where I could essentially spend $20 a day and eat all I can eat meat for 2 hours straight. And like you get this charcoal grill and you cook it over the fire, and it's just like, wow, like to me, I don't know what it was, but it was like something about the city and the way it's set up and the sort of culture around the people and their sort of like simple manners, like waiting on the left side of the elevator so that you can pass if you want to, and just like the orderliness despite the chaos of the streets was just so fascinating that I thrived in creatively, especially as a photographer working on the streets, you know, engaging with humanity, you know, finding beauty in the sort of grungy, gritty alleyways of Shinjuku, to the sort of more beautiful and elegant fashion district of Harajuku, to the parks of Yoyogi, and to the streets of Shibuya. There was just like this perfect trifecta of these three particular locations that I was able to constantly go back with consistency and a routine, following a route in the streets of Tokyo that allowed me to increase the ability for me to create more impactful photographs, and also experiment and tinker and really try to push myself to create new things. And so I feel like on that trip I genuinely had this creative breakthrough through experimentation and then iteration, through going back and trying these new ideas. And so going forward, I'm going to try to adopt those new ideas with my practice and hopefully cultivate a new language with my photography. Once again, returning to that idea of photography being writing, and the idea that it gives you a voice, I think is very meaningful. I don't think you need to really say anything in terms of your photos or explain anything, but I think that they will be explained in the shit you make. And so that's the gospel of the day. Praise be to God. Praise be to Ricoh. Ricoh Jihadist back in Philly, baby. Ricoh Jihadist. Let's get it. Get to wake up and smell the pine cones. Damn.